You're listening to a Comics XF podcast.
X-Men. Get it!
Hey everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Battle of the Atom. This is your weekly X-Men podcast where we wank every story from A to Z.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Zach. You can't do the LCD voice with Zach.
Well, you could say Zachowy, you know.
Zachowy would be good. I'm the bad boy of X-Men podcasting. Is LCD good? I kind of think she is.
Of course she is. Come on now.
I kind of love LCD.
Albert and Elsie-Dee are... See, this is one thing that people have to understand.
We're not even a minute into this podcast. People are going to be like, what the hell are these guys talking about?
All right, we will get into it, but there is something we need to just say front and center at the beginning of this pod, is that Larry
Straight
Hama...
up. Straight up, we got to talk about Larry Hama.
Now tell me. Larry Hama loves writing voices. He loves writing wacky voices. So
I love Larry Hama so much. Guys, we're talking about Albert and Elsie-Dee from Wolverine. And if you don't know about them, buckle up, Buttercup.
This episode
they have not been in many comics. I had honestly thought Albert and Elsie-Dee had been in more comics. They have not.
No, but their reputation precedes them. And
here's the thing about Albert and Elsie-Dee is that Larry Hama is not a long-term thinker. And we'll get that in this. And I say this with so much love for Lethal Larry.
Yeah.
Friend of the show, Lethal Larry. Probably not thinking in the standard 3-act structure like the way the rest of us do. His mind operates a little differently.
Lethal Larry is on a stream of consciousness, page by page basis, and sometimes that makes for exhilarating, and other times it makes for very confusing reading. But
sometimes it's the same comic.
I know.
Oh, he's so good. If you like Larry Hama comics, you like a very specific type of comic, and you know it. And you're gonna look at a Larry Hama comic, and no one's gonna be like, "Oh, Larry Hama is the best writer to ever exist." Larry Hama Shakespeare. No, he's not. He might be one of the most pure comic book writers to ever exist.
Mm-hmm. And quite an entertaining one. So we are talking about Albert and Elsie-Dee, who, if you don't know what we're talking about, we will explain in a moment. Who requested this, Zach? Because this was a Patreon request.
It was a Patreon request. I'm not going to do that the whole episode. I may slip into it from time to time. This was see, I almost did it there. This was a request from Gabriel Swanson. If you want to be like Gabe, I don't know if they go by Gabe. Could just be Gabriel. I got a Gabriel in my life, and he doesn't like to be called Gabe. So
I don't know. That's okay.
But Gabriel's what got put in the form when we asked for first name. So Gabriel, if you want to be like Gabriel, great patron. Go over to patreon.com/Battle of the Atom. Reach deep down into your hearts, pocketbooks. And folks, you just give us $5 and we'll do a whole episode about whatever you want. Heck, you know what? You could go to the comic store this week, put $5 down and say, I would like the X-Men comic that came out. And they'd say, you need another one of those this time.
Where's your other $5?
And I'm just saying, folks, there's value in this. Comics have now gotten more expensive than this podcast. If you go back to the start of the podcast, it's just a little bit more than a comic a month. It is not that now. Actually, if you go back to the start, I think it was $2. That was too low. We were undervaluing ourselves.
It's okay. We've got it figured out. And so for folks who don't know who Albert and Elsie-Dee are, we are going to start with the Wolverine Volume 2 issues that introduce them as characters. So we are starting with number 38, drawn written by Larry Hama, Lethal Larry, and penciled by Mark Silvestri and inked by Dan Green. I think it's important to mention Dan Green as part of this art team.
It very much is, because as this art runs through, it's more Dan Green than Mark Silvestri.
In part,
this arc
it depends on where you're going,
continues.
right? Yeah. So what are we covering here, Zach? We're starting with 38, and then we're going to what?
38 to 43, and then 45 and 46.
Okay.
And here's why we set this up.
Mhm.
One, 44 is a fill-in that's not very good.
It's terrible, but we're not
it's
ranking it today.
unrelated to it. Larry Hama doesn't write arcs in a traditional sense.
Oh, no.
This story doesn't really stop, and it kind of doesn't stop where we stop. It's just, the thing is, the next time Larry Hama gets this book, it is a different story. He's doing a whole different story with some elements of this like feeding into it, but not most of them, just like one side Claremontian plot that's like seeping into it. So this is where we said, we're going to draw a line in the sand. If you wanted to be crazy, like someone did when he wrote a list for Polygon.com about the 10 best Wolverine comics to ever exist, you could say that this also includes the 3 issues before this where Wolverine and Puck go to the past and team up with Ernest Hemingway, the famous writer.
Yep. You could also say that this arc goes from 51 to 53 and then picks up in issue 86.
I would say 86 might be a different arc, but that's...
No, but it's still part of the same story. It's billed as the lost chapter of this story. It's so we had to put a cutoff on it just so that it's manageable.
This, Larry.
Right? Because what Larry does is he tells this story, which just goes on and on and on. And I don't care. I want it to go on forever because it's awesome. But then he just says, cut. We have to tell the Shiva scenario for 3 issues so that we get to Wolverine 50 and have a great die cut cover.
Okay,
and
but hold on. Worth
he
it.
goes back to the story after.
I love Larry Hama. Just so many comics these days we have to tell a tight thing for the trade. We have to really pace this out. And I want to be clear, on average, those comics are better. In general, they are. This, however, is the interesting exception where Larry Hama is firing on all cylinders for like a good year and a half. And I want to say a lot of that comes from Mark Silvestri. Silvestri's art is selling the dynamic, action-packed 80s VHS tape quality of this Wolverine run.
This is your hot. Here's the cool thing about this. It has the aesthetics of like a canon 80s action movie, but it also, because it's a comic book, it has the budget of a James Cameron movie. So it is able to do these things that are just out of this world while still maintaining this very pulpy, goofy sensibility to it. Maybe pulpy is not the right word, but it's got
I would not call it pulpy.
No,
it's a different thing.
It's this,
but
very,
it's the
like,
same. What is the word I'm trying to look for? Lowbrow. It is lowbrow action.
It's macho. It's silly, and it's 8 minutes into this podcast, and we have still not explained the 2 killer robots that are at the center of our comics. So, who are Albert and Elsie-Dee, Zach?
So Albert is an android clone of Wolverine.
Yep.
Who is set to kill Wolverine, except for he's not sent by the Reavers, by Donald Pierce and Lady Deathstrike to kill Wolverine. He's sent to bring Wolverine in contact with Elsie-Dee, who is a robot 5-year-old girl. By the way, Elsie-Dee, like her name is Elsie, like Elsa, like Elsie-Dee, D-E-E. Also, her name is LCD, the letters, like liquid color display. Freaking good. Every time I'm like, Larry, that's it. You can tell Larry Hama spent a long time naming G.I. Joes.
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's
all
beautiful.
LCD has been programmed to do by Pierce is to blow Wolverine up. So that is her core prime directive.
The thing about LCD is every part of her that would be filled with air is instead filled with C7,
Yeah.
Not C4. It's like better than C4. I don't know if that exists.
So you have a Wolverine clone robot, and his sidekick is this tiny blonde girl who's looks like 7 or 8 years old with
5 years
pigtails,
old.
and
Pigtails, pink dress.
and they both
Walks like this.
like speech impediments. So Albert has a short-circuiting stutter.
I'm Albert. I'm the best there is what I do.
And then Elsie-Dee talks like Tweety Bird from Looney Tunes.
She got a Will Wisp.
Yes.
And I'm not making fun of it. That is just what Larry Hama is writing in here. And at a certain point, it falls into this level of, we're doing a cartoon. Like, Larry Hama is doing a Looney Tunes with Wolverine.
Yes. So the way that Albert and Elsie-Dee get Wolverine's attention is they go to Venice Beach and they start to knock over local, like, illegal sports gambling locations. And then it's like, why is Wolverine doing this? There seems to be some confusion about that. And so Wolverine is like, wait, that's not me. I'm going to go and hang out in Venice Beach and figure out what's going on.
Which, by the way, immediately, Wolverine pulls some baddies. Bunny and Cindy, they're great. They are the bikini girls that hang out with Wolverine for most of this, including the part where they are going surfing and he's like, well, we need to take my car. And they're like, but our boards won't fit. And then he makes it a convertible for him.
Yeah, he cuts the top off of the car. And I want to just stress that I think one of the things that Silvestri is criticized for over the years is, the drawing of babes, shall we say, right? A certain kind of body type. I will say it is very clear from his drawings of these two women that he knows the anatomy of a woman and is able to draw it in a way that actually looks realistic and is not the 90s style of sort of, let's say, wrapping two melons in a tube sock, or like, like that's not what he's doing here.
I feel like I remember a quote from all the Image guys who, when they were sitting around, and it was one of the documentaries they've made about this, but they all said, yeah, Silvestri's the best artist of all of us. Like, he's the one we all looked up to. He knew what he was doing.
He is absolutely killing it here, because we're going from these very goofy caricature scenes with these low-level thugs in the sports betting world, all the way to, we get to a point where Albert is literally standing on top of a B-2 bomber stealth plane and piloting it at the Twin Towers so that he can kill Wolverine, and because he thinks he needs to save Elsie-Dee. Even
because
though
if
Elsie-Dee,
he kills Wolverine, then Elsie-Dee won't explode and die.
Yes, because he needs to protect his robot friend. And when I tell you this is a delight, this is why I love comics. Oh my God, this is great.
It's just, Elsie-Dee and Albert should be the most annoying thing in the world, right? Like, they should be insufferable characters. And I am sure there is a segment of the population who hates Elsie-Dee so much. Like, probably annoying to read. What's this silly child doing in my serious manly Wolverine book? Larry Hama don't care. I don't care. I'm having a blast. I'm having so much fun. Because here's the thing. Every single issue, it just starts escalating, because it's like, well, we're going to blow up Wolverine. And then they're like, actually, we programmed ourselves so that we don't want to blow up Wolverine. And then Wolverine has to find Albert and Elsie-Dee. And then Sabretooth shows up. And then Lady Deathstrike is mad that these robots aren't doing anything. So she shows up. Sabretooth tries to convince Wolverine that he's his dad. And Wolverine's like, yeah, man, I don't know. I'm very confused.
What are you talking about?
I don't think Nick Fury also shows up and he's like, Nick, I don't think he's my dad, but he thinks he's my dad. I don't really remember much. So, I mean, anything goes. Nick Fury says, super great news. He's not your dad. Weird that he thinks he is, though, because he's 100% being honest that he thinks he's your dad. Mask shows up for a little bit. All of the Morlocks do almost die.
Cable shows up. Cable is here for several issues. because
Folks, this is Stream of Consciousness Comics. It's beautiful to see in action.
Yeah, we're actually jumping out of Rob Liefeld's New Mutants right into this, because this is following up on Sabretooth's issues of that
With
where
Caliban.
he was with Caliban. And so you have Cable looking for Sabretooth in the sewer, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, now we're in Wolverine, and now we're fighting, and now the streets are flooding, and
Cable also seems to be unsure what he's doing in Wolverine, which I find very funny.
Yeah, it's great. It's also great when Elsie-Dee pops her head off, chews on Cable's leg, lets her body steal his giant gun, and blows open a door so that she can rescue Wolverine from drowning. Like, this is amazing fun stuff.
It's not traditionally good. It transcends that. Like, there is a level of quality that is like, I can hand this to anyone and say, no, you should read this. This is a good piece of art. This is a good piece of fiction. And if I'm looking at let's just look at our list for a second. Maybe the top 8 comics on this list, I could hand to somebody and say, just anybody, and say, read this. You'll be good.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 8 X-Men comics of all times that I could just hand to someone and like, you've got it. Here's some good fiction. Run with it. This transcends that. And this is the kind of fiction that makes you want to do a 350 episode run of a podcast about dumb X-Men stories, a franchise that, let's face it, is mostly bad.
By the time we get to 45 and 46, when Wolverine is now invested in freeing a Canadian werewolf type character called the Hunter in Darkness that he had encountered many issues ago from some sort of weird like zookeeper promoter.
In Larry Hama's, I want to say first arc, or right at the start of this, it's actually, you know what? I take it back. I forgot. That's the story right before Blood and Claws. That's at 34.
Yeah. So he's following up on that, and we are getting the like crossover of all of these different things. Lady Deathstrike, Sabretooth, the Hunter in the Darkness arc, Albert and Elsie-Dee in the Morlock tunnels. And like we said before, it just stops because it's like, well, Larry, we got the anniversary issue coming up. We really got to do the big thing for 50. So can you just take a break from that? And then we'll get back to it later. So it is anticlimactic, but this feels so much like a train barreling down the tracks. It is so much fun.
Can I tell you one of the fun things I love in this? Because we forgot how Storm is great as she's trying to search for Wolverine.
Yes.
We also haven't talked about how Jubilee hates Elsie-Dee so much.
Yes. She is.
Jubilee does not care
happy.
for that robot. She's like, I'm his sidekick. This is ridiculous. Get this child out of here.
We did not mention the absolutely amazing Storm line that Hama gives Storm at the beginning of this in 38, which is there's a guy hassling her on the street. She gives him a far off date into the future, and he says, "What's that?" And she goes, "That would be the date that you would get out of Traction if you so much as bother me one more time." And it's such a great moment. It's like, it's a little verbose, like it's too much, but it's so action movie specific that I love it.
It's just like, he knows what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Larry Hama is aware. He is writing this because he's got to fill 20 pages and get to the deadline. And it doesn't matter because he knows he's writing Wolverine. So next month, he'll still have 20 pages. He doesn't have to wrap anything up. He can just go. It's like going to a Fish concert. The songs don't need to have a structure or
it's a jam band
set ending. Really is like, people talk about jam band comics. This is a jam band mentality to writing comics, and I love it.
Yeah, they're
Larry's so good.
They're vibing, and we're only covering this chunk of the story. But if I told you that where this story will go is the Mojoverse, time travel, plasma wraiths, and a war between two sparring Native American troops by the 80s in this series, you'd be like, wait, what? But that's exactly what happens. So
We're not going to say it's all coherent. Let's be
no,
clear.
but it's just, that's the level of exciting storytelling that Larry is just going with here. So I loved this. It was a pleasure to read, and I think we should try and rank it on our big old list, Zach.
The thing about our big old list is that we have ranked 918 X-Men stories, which is too many.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. The best, number one on the list, House of X Powers of 10. Let's go by 300s. Number 300 is Inferno Battle World. Number 600 is The Rise and Fall of the Shi'ar Empire. And number 900 is X-Men 100th Anniversary Special, which is like very far in the future still.
That's very bad.
Worst X-Men comic of all time, still in the future, even farther. 918, 2099, World of Tomorrow. Very bad comic.
So we have the Shiva scenario at 105, which I think is totally fair. I'm curious if you think this is better or worse than the Shiva scenario.
It's kind of not, and that's the thing.
I honestly think
the Shiva scenario tells a better overall story.
Yes, I would agree. It's
as
doing
does
more,
Blood and Claws.
Yeah, it's doing more to add to the mythology, and it's a tighter story. I will say I think this is more fun than the Shiva scenario, just because it's so like borderline unhinged how wild it is.
Yes, the Shiva scenario has Larry Hama injecting some pathos. It also has Larry Hama having Wolverine ride a motorcycle up the stairs and ramp onto a helicarrier. So let's not say that the Shiva scenario is uniquely hinged on anything.
No,
but it has a bit more meat to it.
And I pointed that out because the Blood and Claws is all the way up at 77. So we know we're not in the top 100. However, I do think that we're probably in the top 200.
Friend of the show, Leah Williams, is holding 200 strong with X Factor Volume 4, that first arc. I mean, this is better than that. Leah, love it. This is better than it.
This is a blast. I also think this is better than Marvelous X-Men that we talked about last week at 167.
It succeeds in its mission better than Marvelous X-Men does. I'm not going to say that its mission is better than Marvelous X-Men's mission from an artistic standpoint, but kind of does. It does what it sets out to do very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the first arc of the Doug and Noto Cable at 148.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is better than the Cable stuff.
I
would say here's where I'm looking. We have a chunk at 140 is Ultimate X-Men: The Tomorrow People. 141 is Blood Hungry from Marvel Comic Presents.
Mm-hmm.
And 142 is Nimrod from the New Mutants, or not New Mutants, New X-Men, Academy X era stuff. That feels like the right spot to me. Like that chunk. I don't know if this is better or worse than Blood Hungry. Blood Hungry has really good art.
Blood Hungry has that great Sam Keith art, but it's I do think that this is more fun in terms of like action stakes than that is. But I don't think I'd go much higher than this.
I don't think it's better than that Cyclops has to fight a squid on his honeymoon.
No.
Yeah, that is a honeymoon.
No,
yeah.
But I do like this better than the first arc of Ultimate X-Men at 140. So I think this could be our new 140 if you're okay with that.
I'm great with it. This is our new 140. It's about Albert Elsie-Dee.
So before we move on to the next story, someone pointed out to me online, and excuse me for not remembering who this was that pointed this out to me, but there is an Epic collection out that does collect the Blood and Claws, and then it goes right into this stuff, but it oddly cuts off before the end of this arc and it gets into Shiva scenario. So it's worth tracking down though. I mean, if you like that format.
Y'all, it's all on the app. So,
Or you could just read it on Marvel Unlimited. But
You
if
can
you
just
like a
find it.
trade paperback, you know.
or you can go to literally any long box.
Yes,
You'll
you will
find
these.
1991 Wolverine there. I promise you.
Yes, this was a best-selling comic. All right, so Zach, we mentioned some other Albert and Elsie-Dee appearances that happened later in Wolverine Volume 2, but after that, for a very long time, we didn't see these characters. So what is the next series that we are talking about?
So, to be clear, Albert shows up without LCD in between here and between that Wolverine arc and now in The Hunt for Wolverine, whichever one was the Charles Soule book that had Daredevil, and Doug got addicted to the internet, as we all do from time to time.
I do remember Albert being in that, yes.
Albert's in that one. Here's the thing about Albert being in that one is that, do you know who Albert's biggest fan is?
Other than Larry Hama?
Other than Larry Hama.
Other than us? I don't know. Who?
It's one Chester Boris Sobalski.
Oh boy, that doesn't surprise me.
CB loves Albert. It has shoehorned him into things. So, when the event Iron Man 2020 was going on in the year 2020, because Marvel's too on the nose about what's frankly a bad Iron Man suit design. I mean, I've got nothing for Arno Stark in the weird gear Iron Man. Like, I don't get it. I did not read this event. I will say that this event was initially solicited to have a 2020 X-Men.exe book that just didn't come out. It wasn't even solicited. It was on an ad. And that didn't happen. Instead, we got 2020 iWolverine, which is one of the worst titles I've ever heard.
It's really, really dumb. And I don't care. I mean, the title is bad, but this is Larry Hama, illustrated by Roland Bashi. And it's essentially Albert out to find the pieces of LCD over the course of 2 issues. That's all this is. It's just 2 issues.
Albert goes to Madripoor.
Yep.
Right at the, like, I don't know if it's page 1 or page 2, but it's real darn close, where someone's like, hey, you're a robot? Isn't there a robot revolution or something going on? And it says, go check out Iron Man 2020. Albert straight up says, yeah, I don't care about any of that.
No.
Beautiful tie-in.
Yeah.
Beautiful tie-in to say, I'm not reading that Dan Slott nonsense, which I'm also not reading that Dan Slott nonsense. They made a documentary about some of the nonsense around this Dan Slott nonsense at this time.
Mm-hmm.
Very funny that Marvel put that out. It's very funny that that documentary is on Disney Plus if you want to watch it.
I've seen it. It's pretty funny.
Pete Woods is a saint. Every letterer in the world deserves more pay than they get.
Yeah. Yeah. So Albert is just, all he wants is to know where Donald Pierce is. And Donald Pierce is running, his own fantastical android research center or something like that.
Oh, we forgot in the last story, the reason why Albert and LCD don't do their thing is because Bonebreaker.
Oh, right. Bonebreaker programs them.
That has a tank for legs is stupid and didn't program them right. And he's
trying to
hide that from Donald Pierce.
He's like, should I tell him? Should I tell him that I programmed LCD to be a genius instead
and Reese
of a dum-dum?
Reese is like, you're such a freaking idiot. This is why you don't have legs, man. This is why you thought tank treads were a better idea for mobility. You idiot. I love him so much. It's just, I have a Bonebreaker head toy. That's it. Mm-hmm. That's the only part of him I have is the Bonebreaker head because it came with Maggot.
Zach, we also neglected to say that in the midst of the Morlock tunnels, Albert is trying to get scrap metal so that he can make his own fusion reactor. So that he can invent fusion so that his LCD. Oh my God. All right. So,
in some tunnels with a box of scraps.
Yes. It's amazing.
Larry Hama does not hit the same heights. Larry Hama, for these 2 issues, does have the same level of, I'm just going to do this one thing and plot very, very loosely and see what happens. And we're just going to do action movie stuff.
It's great. Albert finds Pierce. Pierce is, experimenting in his lab in his hazmat suit and says, "Hey, no hard feelings, but I sold her for scraps." And he's like, "You did what?" Freaks out. Goes on to, confront all of the different gangs in Madripoor that have a piece of LCD. And, like her head is in charge of bookkeeping for the Yakuza or something.
No, her head is in charge of bookkeeping for the Russian mob,
Oh,
the
right.
Karamazov brothers, like
The Karamazov brothers. Yeah, that's great.
the Dostoevsky thing. This is the second time I thought about Fyodor Dostoevsky today.
And then
The other time I was thinking about Crime and Punishment earlier.
her arms are somewhere else, and then her body has been dressed up like a Japanese schoolgirl. And she's like, "Oh, this is kind of," when he puts her back together, she's like, "This is cool. This is kind of cool. Very what did she say? Vewy manga."
Very manga. It's just like Larry knows.
Yeah.
Larry knows. It's so freaking good.
The second
It's
issue,
dumb. It's so dumb is the thing. It's so good.
the second issue is just action movie. Both issues are both just action movie, but the second issue is they've got to get to the airport and they've got to get through all of these Madripoor gangs who want their pieces of LCD back so that they can get to the airport. And it's great. It's really fun action. I what do you feel about Bashi's art? I don't dislike it.
I don't dislike it. I have enjoyed Bashi's art in other comics a lot more than this one. If you told me that this was a book that was thrown together late in the game to fill a gap in the publishing hole, I would believe you. And I would believe that Bashi was open and signed up for the assignment.
It's interesting because both Silvestri and Bashi do know how to draw a child's face, which is helpful. There's a lot of artists in comics who can't do that. And I think that Silvestri succeeds a little bit more than Bashi. But am I complaining when by the time we get to the second issue, Albert is throwing LCD, who's holding a chainsaw, at the limo of the bad guys? It's great.
I mean, it's just a dumb comic.
It is. It really
comics
is.
can be dumb, they can be good. And like I just got to tell you, like this is when me and I think I want to say I reviewed this for CXF with Nola Fowl when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we both came down to, yeah, there's a lot you could criticize about this comic. It's pretty dumb. And that's a compliment. This
feels like the kind of adrenaline rush that I get when I go see not a Transformers, but a good Michael Bay movie, right? Like, especially when we're getting these scenes where Donald Pierce is setting up all of his weaponry at the airport, and the airport's like, "Hey, you can't do that." And he's like, I'm not checking in through customs yet. I'm not going through security with my giant rail gun that I'm setting up in your lobby. There's a humor to this that Larry Hama really brings to it that's very funny.
Like, there's not a lot to this story, but I'm not complaining. This is a fun little thing. Like, it's worth your time if you enjoy Albert and Elsie-Dee.
Yes. If you enjoyed these characters in those Wolverine issues that we were just talking about, and you have never experienced these two issues of just the two of them cutting loose and having a good time, there's explosions, there's cars cut in half, there's, all kinds of fun, just action madness. It's a good time. Is it like the height of comics? No. It is not nearly as good as what we were just talking about, but it is still very fun.
It is very fun. I look at, let's say, number 400 on our list right now, which is Uncanny X-Men 300.
Uh-huh.
Uncanny X-Men 300 is probably better than this.
Yeah, I think that I think we could be in. Are we in the 400s? Like at 500, we have the Hunt for Xavier. And I'm not sure that this is better than that. Like, I'm even looking at some of the stories in the 500s, and I don't know, but we're in similar territory to something like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe
Is this
we
better or worse
are-
than Bishop's Crossing?
I don't think it's as good, but
Is this better or worse than Weapons of Mutant Destruction?
I do think it's better than Weapons of Mutant Destruction.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we're in this.
So we've got a chunk. We've got a chunk here.
Yeah. Don't know if it's better than Songs of the Orphan Child from X-23.
It's not better than that Runaway story either, but it is better than that Gambit Tombstone Blues.
Then we've got our spot. This is 526. Terrible name. iWolverine 2020 1 and 2.
No, it's 2020 iWolverine.
Oh, see, that doesn't even make sense with the cover, because the cover says iWolverine 2020. But
Look,
yeah,
the
you're
whole
right.
the whole thing's stupid. It's
Yeah. All right, we got one more appearance of Albert and Elsie-Dee to talk about. Zach, this is pretty recent.
This is pretty recent, and I was hesitant to cover it because it's so recent. And then I've decided it's my show. I can do what I want.
Darn
as long as
tootin'.
Adam agrees. We're on the team. We're partners in this. We're co-hosts.
Well, I never thought for a second that you were actually going to say no to this, given a certain character that is also in this story. So what are we talking about here?
Who gets a lot of love in this, and we're talking about Dark X-Men from Fall of X.
Yes,
it's
is
by
Dark
Steve
X-Men
Fox.
Volume 2.
It is Volume 2. It's by Steve Fox and Jonas Scharf. We're going to get into everything. Actually, let's start. Here's the cast, because it's the cover of the first issue. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 has 8 characters on it. There's at least 2 more I would consider pretty substantial characters on the roster of this book.
Mm-hmm.
Those characters are Carmen, who is Gimmick in Children of the Atom, which is a book I want to go back to because I know it has. I think that book is smarter than people gave it credit for, but has some story structure issues that I think came from the fact that it was written and then had to essentially be rewritten in delays and all that crap that happened with it.
Yep.
The other is Maggot, who is not on the cover of the first one.
Nope.
And I'm going to say, I don't want to say that I had anything to do with everything that happened with Maggot. I do think that I may have pushed, I may have started a push for Maggot that led to this happening. Because Steve Fox doesn't know that I like Maggot.
But
Vidayala did. Vidayala, I don't know if I can say this on air. It's been years. Vidayala said, yeah, I explicitly put Maggot in Children of the Atom as a member of the X-Men because I thought you'd get a kick out of it. That was a good pick.
Yeah, and you could tell that Steve is interested in picking up pieces from a variety of different things, and Children of the Atom is definitely one of them. So for folks who don't remember this, even though it just ended this past February, Dark X-Men Volume 2 is part of the Fall of X miniseries bombardment that we got over the course of the last year or so. It is a team led by Madeline Pryor and Alex Summers. You also have on the team, at least for a short period of time, Archangel.
Immediately dies and then dies again.
Yes, kind of dies twice. Azazel, M-Plate, Zero.
Zero from Generation X, or not Generation X, Generation Hope, excuse me.
Yes.
The Akira guy from Generation Hope.
Albert and, Elsie-Dee does not appear to begin with, but will appear in this mini. Albert's
also not really on the team.
No.
Albert's body. We'll get into the Albert stuff.
Well, Albert's been hijacked by Orcus. So,
but then he gets also hijacked by Zero.
Yes,
which is pretty funny.
Yes.
Also, Gambit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did forget Gambit.
Probably the emotion. Honestly, the emotional core of this book is kind of Gambit. He has the big arc or big beats in this. It's a weird roster, and it's 2-packed. I mean, maybe at one point when this was pitched, it was thought to go a little bit longer. Who's to say?
It does feel like it has, legs, right?
It has legs in a way that most of the Fall of X stuff doesn't, because this is at least like this is a dumb team.
Yeah, but
But it's like it's gotta appeal to it. Like I like it.
Yeah, even the shots that we see. This story begins in the, what do they call this? The Limbo Embassy?
Yeah, their embassy in New York City. The
Yeah,
Limbo
the
Embassy.
embassy for Limbo that Madeline runs after the events of the Dark Web crossover, right? So inside of this is kind of a haven for misunderstood or slightly evil mutants who need a place to go.
And very specifically, mutants who are like, I don't know if Krakoa is for me.
Yeah, yes. So, we're getting double page spreads with like Fantasia floating around. And remember that lady that conjured dragons from the Bendis run? Like she's
Animex.
here.
Yes, I know her. You get Snot and that one bug lady from Aaron's Wolverine and the X-Men. Like you get Steve Fox obviously has the same love for a bunch of weird obscure guys.
Oh yeah.
Just a bunch of freaks.
You can tell he is having some fun here.
I will say this cast is, and I know they kill off a lot of them, but even so, with 5 issues, this cast is too big.
Mm-hmm.
And that is to its detriment. Like Albert's on this team explicitly because CB Cebulski said it would be fun to put Albert in a book.
To Fox's credit, though, the fact that what he does with Albert is immediately have Zero subsume Albert into his own body. So you get this amalgam of Zero and Albert. For folks who don't remember, Zero was that Akira dude from Generation Hope from years before this. And then later, we finally get Elsie-Dee catching up, and Elsie-Dee becomes part of the body. So it's a 3-headed monster by the time you get to the end, and that's fun.
It's fun. If Zero's not in this book, do we lose anything except for him being just this weird little freak?
Not really, but it is kind of fun.
I do love that he's a weird little freak.
Yeah. So, Fox is realizing that there's no resurrection in Fall of X. So Archangel bites it. Havoc dies, but Madeline is able to use some sort of sorcery to bring him back zombie style. He's not looking too good. And I will say that this series did put an enormous smile on my face with the callback to who the central villain of the story is, Zach. Because while we have Madeline Pryor leading the Dark X-Men, the villain of this series is, we have these 2 Orcus henchmen who no one's quite sure how they were hired, et cetera, but they have a very specific prisoner that they would like to unleash upon the Limbo Embassy. And who is it, Zach?
It's the Goblin Queen from Secret Wars Inferno.
Yes.
Which is
last saw in what? Hopeless is all new.
Blue.
Oh no, X-Men Blue, right.
It was blue.
With Colin Bunn.
Now, I think that's very funny. I'm not convinced that it's like the best story choice because now we've gotten very complicated.
I agree that the cast is way too big, right? To have the emotional beats. But if I've only got 5 issues, and I do believe that all of these Fall of X minis were at least positioned originally as minis. So Fox knows going in that he has a limited amount of time. I do think it's a very fun draw to pull that character out of obscurity, who we know is still sitting around somewhere, and have this Maddie versus Maddie, battle. I like it. I think it's fun. He does this cool thing with Archangel where he's been mutated into some sort of, I don't know, skeleton of death, and
Goblin Queen gives him a skull head.
Gambit literally has to blow him up to kill him. There's some pretty gruesome and fun things in here.
Well, in the core, there's a couple of core emotional conflicts in here, and this is where I kind of wish there was more. For being only a 5-issue mini, it's paced weird because they go on a side quest in the middle of all this.
Yes, issue 3 is a side quest to Marisol. Is that the mutant? Yeah. The pheromone poison?
Pheromone. Hold on. Yes. Adam, did you recognize this mutant beforehand? Had you seen her before? Or do you
Who
remember seeing her?
is this? Oh yes,
She's
this is
she's the mushroom lady or the mushroom kid from the Greg Pak Storm mini.
yes,
Or not mini, it
yes.
was like an 11 issue series. So already this is a comic book that has my boy Maggot in it
Mhm,
and a mushroom girl.
mhm.
So like he's got me. It's got all the things that I want in a thing. And it actually has Maggot having the big emotional like stakes of this because he's telling Gambit specifically, he's like, why are we doing this? Why are we being the X-Men? We're the X-Men. I love that Maggot's just like, screw you guys, I'm an X-Man. Like, I was on the team a lot. No one liked me, but I'm on the team. I
Right.
can speak for this. He's like, Archangel's out there. He just died. We
Mhm.
brought this robot back with us, but we didn't go get our friend. We left a man behind. I'm not cool with that. And like, he is an antagonistic force against Madeline and against Havoc. Like, shouldn't we be doing X-Men stuff, people?
Mhm.
And like not approving of it. And it works shockingly well.
It's great. He is a really smart foil to the rest of the team. I do think that it gets a little too busy, right? You know, when
It gets busy. The fact that they go on side quests, half the team goes to get Mushroom Girl, who adds nothing really to the plot, and it just has them be away for a little bit.
right, there's a Morlock side quest, and then when the Goblin
Maggot
Queen
does leave with the Morlocks and becomes a boat captain, which is the best thing that happened to anyone during Fall of X. He gets a beard. It's incredible.
thoughts on when the Goblin Queen and Orcus attack, the Abyss bomb that is brought to the front. I mean, this is where
So
it's getting
freaking
a
stupid.
little too much.
Listen, that's Larry Hama stupid there, though. Like, it's where there's an Abyss bomb and then Azazel, who hasn't really done much except for have a completely unnecessary weird thing with Emplate about some bond. Here's the thing. No one was worried about maybe loose ends about the Monet St. Croix family owing a favor to Azazel from freaking Weapon X Force. No one cared about that.
Nope.
We're the only people that remember that. And even then, that's like the 8th most memorable thing from that story.
Azazel does get ripped in half by
After killing, I love that he kills Abyss.
Yes.
And then he's just harassing Emplate, who he's been harassing this whole time. Again, Emplate does not need to be here. He's just a weirdo, and that's fine. And Azazel gets eaten by the Dragon Nightcrawler.
Yes. He gets ripped in half by the Dragon Nightcrawler, which is fun.
What's more fun is that came out the week after, literally the next week after the big retcon from X-Men Blue Origins.
Oh, nice.
So straight up, they're like, and now just to be clear, Azazel, we never have to worry about Azazel again. We're killing him off.
Yeah.
And we don't have to do Azazel stuff now, guys. We're free. I do think the challenge in this comes to that you need Maddie to be the core of this and have her conflict be the big emotional core, but I don't think you get enough from her or her interplay with Havoc because you are drawing focus to other places. I like the dynamic with Gambit being kind of a mole on this team and then kind of not sure how to handle it. I like the dynamic with Maggot pushing against that. And I like that Maddie like has to deal with a team that doesn't know what's going on and then has to face like an evil version of her. Unfortunately, so many Madeline Pryor stories are about her facing her literal mirror that it falls a bit flat. And like
it is true. We did just do something very similar to this in Dark Web. So
and in Inferno and let's be honest, every Madeline Pryor story.
Yeah. I do want to very much compliment Jonas Scharf on the artwork. I think the art in this really and the color work by Frank Martin, it really matches the tone of the story that is being told here. It is dark. It is malevolent. It does speak to who these characters are and what the general idea of this book is supposed to be. So I think all of that lines up pretty well, but it just gets to a point of what you're talking about where it's spread too thin, even over the course of 5 issues. Like when we get to the point where like Ben Reilly has to show up,
Oh yeah,
Like, no,
I don't.
we don't need that.
We didn't need to check in on Chasm. No one needed
No.
that. Like,
Oh.
it's such a weirdly paced book
Mhm.
for being 5 issues, and that's its biggest downfall. Here's the thing: I kind of want, like, of all the Fall of X stuff, I kind of want more of this. Like, this is the one that I'm like, we should have gotten to see what happens next, which we absolutely don't. And I guess this is being followed up in the Chasm story that
I don't
Steve
know.
Fox is doing, maybe?
It's interesting because Havoc is going to be on the new X Factor team. So
Hold on. Can we just talk about how Havoc left the United States to join Krakoa and then left Krakoa to join literally hell?
Mhm.
And I guess is now being re-employed by the United States government. I
Well,
don't
we
know how
don't-
all that works.
we don't know yet. That book hasn't come out yet. It
It
does
hasn't
seem
come out, but the pitch is that's the it's a Mark Russell book.
Mhm.
So it's going to be a parody of working for the government. Like, that's what it,
we'll find out.
I like a lot of Mark Russell stuff, but it's just like I know what I'm going to get.
Yeah.
And
We'll-
anyway,
we'll see.
we'll get
But
there when we get there. Those books haven't come out. We can't prejudge.
no, and you are correct that this feels like a spiritual successor to Hellions in a lot of ways. You know,
It really does, to the point that they get Steven Segovia to do the covers. Like, they know what they're doing.
It definitely feels of a piece with that book, and but it doesn't have, Hellions had that concentrated cast, and it allowed you to build the characters over the course of probably about 2 years almost, whereas this is not going to have that kind of legroom.
This just doesn't have the space to do what it wants to do. And unfortunately, I kind of want it to do what it wants to do.
Mhm.
It's like, I think you give this another big editorial pass and say, hey, this is almost right, but we need to rework this before we go to print. I think then you have a really stellar book. Unfortunately, it's some missed opportunities and also Maggot as a pirate captain. So I mean, hits and misses there.
At 383, we have Dark Web X-Men, which has that, pretty great Phil Noto, Rod Reese art. It's goofy, it's funny, it has a touching conclusion with Jean Grey and Maddie. I don't know if this hits those kind of emotional highs that
Dark Web X-Men does more with what it needs to do. Like, it succeeds.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
Astonishing X-Men 13 to 17 Until Our Hearts Stop by Matthew Rosenberg and Greg Land.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of think this has a lot of the same problems as that run.
Very similar in different ways, yeah.
Also has Havoc, now that I say that.
Uh-huh.
It's like, it's supposed to be it feels like it should be the start of something, and then it isn't.
Yeah.
And it's a weird letdown, though. I think Astonishing is a little bit tighter of a story, even if the art is significantly worse.
I think we're in the right place, though, because I think for any of the negatives, this is still successful in a lot of ways,
Here's a spot I'm thinking.
Okay.
425 is X-Men 2099 Oasis.
Mm-hmm.
I think X-Men 29 Oasis is better.
Okay.
At 429 is Amazing Nightcrawler.
I think this is better than Amazing Nightcrawler.
Don't let Anna hear that.
It's Amazing Nightcrawler has its highs, but I just
you don't have to defend it to me, Adam. I'm not the one who's judging you on this. I agree. I was gonna say, is this better than the Doom arc of X-Men 2099, 21 to 25?
Yeah, I think it is.
It's also probably better than the Trial of Gambit, right? Trial of Gambit's not good.
It has its moments, but I don't think it's like, All right, so this is going to be our new 426 Dark X-Men Volume 2, which I will still recommend.
I feel like if Steve Fox heard we were comparing this comic to X-Men 2099, he'd be okay with it.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. So That one, we didn't have as much Albert and Elsie-Dee content, but they're in there. By the time they get to the end, they're both repaired. They both have their own bodies back. And
LCD's
they're
head
ready
gets
for...
shot out of a grenade launcher.
Yes, that was
It's great. That part's good. She shoots LCD like she's an RPG.
Yep.
Very fun. Just too much going on in that book.
It's busy. It's very busy.
It's busy. But do you know who else is busy?
Who, Zach?
Not our guest next week, Jordan D. White. He's not doing X-Men anymore. I'm kidding. He has other stuff to do.
It's not like he's unemployed.
He's got other things to go do. I know he has things going on. And in his busy schedule, he's making time to talk to us about the end of the first Krakoan age.
That is very exciting. We should thank our Patreon patron for...
Gabriel, thank you so much. If you want to be like Gabriel, $5. Give us a topic. Give us an issue like we like this one. We'll find something in that we would like to bring to the table and give you this bespoke experience, customized just for you.
Absolutely. As Zach just alluded to, it is the end of, well, the book calls it the first Krakoan age. We'll see how that plays out over time. But we did just do a wrap up of X-Men 35 and somehow / Uncanny 700. That doesn't make sense.
I'm mad about it and I'm letting it go.
Just breathe. Just breathe. There's also some other content that's coming out that I think I'm contributing to about the end of this era. So I don't know, just as always, tune into Comics XF for great stuff. Folks, you can always follow me on socials, Adam Reck on Blue Sky and Instagram, Arthur Stacy on Twitter. And Zach, you already said it. We've got a good one coming up next week.
We got the J-Dog in the house.
That's
We're
right.
gonna ask him. I've got so many questions to ask him that aren't about X-Men.
I have lots of Venom questions, because he's now at the helm while this big movie is going to come out. So
is he going to let there be Venom? Or Carnage? I'm sorry, it was Let There Be Carnage. It doesn't matter. It's the two boys.
Did you see the Venom 3 trailer?
I mean, I watched it. It looks...
Yeah. Zach, there was a Venom horse.
The Venom horse was easily the best part of the Venom 3 trailer. No one's disagreeing with that. A+, love it. Venom 3, The Last Dance or whatever it's called, looks like a really good movie to watch on an airplane after I've already had more beers at the airport bar than I should have.
So,
which is the same way I watched Venom 2.
I was going to say, it's just like Venom 1 and Venom 2.
Yes. Join us next week. It's going to be a good time. Until then, folks, this has been Battle of the Atom. We hope you survived the experience.
Get it!